The first thing Dr. Lillian Marchant noticed when she stepped into classroom 7X wasn't the alien architecture, though the walls shimmered like liquid metal and the floor hummed faintly underfoot, but the quiet. Not a whisper, not a clatter of mechanical chairs, just a focused, almost sacred silence that seemed to press against her eardrums. The students, dozens of species she'd never imagined in her most speculative research, orbited around their desks, or floated, or crouched, or unfolded, absorbing instruction with a precision humans could never achieve. Dr. Marchant, a veteran educator of interstellar biology at the prestigious United Earth Academy, had trained for this. Years of curriculum planning, xenolinguistics, and interspecies psychology had led to this room, to this class. And yet, as she straightened her crisp lab coat, she felt the tug of something unsettling at the base of her spine. Because today, someone new had arrived. And the someone new was not alien. The human child, 12 years old, small for their age, brown hair perpetually tousled, and wearing a hoodie that looked ridiculously mundane against the backdrop of bioluminescent walls, stood at the entrance with a backpack too large for their frame. Their eyes were wide, nervous, darting between the floating jellyfish-like creatures near the ceiling and the insectoid students that clicked their mandibles in greeting. Marcus Hall, she whispered under her breath, checking the roster again. It was real. He was real. And he was in her class. Welcome, Marcus, Dr. Marchant said, projecting calm. Her voice echoed slightly, and a ripple of curiosity passed through the room. The aliens didn't gossip the way humans did, but their collective attention was like a wave, shifting and settling in seconds. Marcus flinched, clutching the strap of his backpack like it might protect him from being swallowed whole by the unknown. She motioned for him to sit, and he obeyed with a hesitant shuffle. The desk assigned to him was a neutral zone, a levitating platform that adjusted to the student's body automatically. Marcus stared at it like it might bite, and she suppressed a smile. Now, she began, her tone steady, professional. Today, we'll start with the basics of cross-species genetics. And Marcus, you'll join in. You might need some help at first, but we'll take it slow. The class began. And almost immediately, Dr. Marchant realized something she hadn't anticipated. The aliens weren't looking at him with disdain, or pity, or curiosity. They were studying him. Not like a subject in a lab, they were probing, calculating, observing with the precision of creatures who learn not by words, but by instinct and pattern. And Marcus, despite the trembling of his small hands and the rapid beat of his heart, didn't recoil. He met their gazes, blinked when necessary, and somehow, in that unspoken exchange, he established himself as an anomaly worthy of their attention. By lunchtime, Dr. Marchant's notes were already scribbled in frantic, uneven lines. Marcus Hall had solved the problem she'd designed specifically to challenge alien neural patterns. He'd adapted to an entirely foreign language in minutes, using context clues that would take many alien students weeks to master. Dr. Marchant, whispered her teaching assistant, a luminescent being named Viral, whose skin shifted colors with emotion, this human, he is unlike any recorded specimen. Statistically, impossible. Lillian swallowed, feeling a mixture of awe and terror. Keep your voice down, she muttered. He's a student. Treat him like a student. But in truth, she couldn't. Every instinct in her scientific mind screamed that Marcus was breaking the rules of everything she had ever understood. Genetics, cognition, adaptability, he was rewriting the book in real time. And as she watched him, scribbling notes furiously and mimicking alien notation that would have been meaningless to any other human, she felt the first seed of doubt: could a single human child belong here at all? The real test came when the lesson turned to interactive exercises. Marcus was paired with a trilimbed species whose neural signals could transmit chemical responses into the air, effectively communicating complex concepts without words. Within minutes, he was exchanging ideas, not fluently, not perfectly, but effectively. The alien's multiple eyes narrowed in concentration, and then, astonishingly, its limbs rearranged in a gesture of acknowledgement, something she had only ever seen between members of the same species. Dr. Marchant's chest tightened. He was bridging a gap that centuries of interstellar diplomacy had failed to span. And yet, the human child had a look of quiet determination, as if he had known all along this would be possible. By the end of the day, the tension in the classroom had shifted. The students, previously indifferent or mildly curious, were now engaged. Even the normally aloof ones, like the crystalline beings from Keelara 9, were leaning forward, observing Marcus with something akin to respect. And when he packed his backpack to leave, he looked around at them, his small, defiant presence anchoring the room, and Dr. Marchant realized something unsettling. The entire ecosystem of her class had changed in one day. Later, in her office, she reviewed the footage from the day. Every movement Marcus had made, every gesture and response, was highlighted with anomalies, deviations from the expected patterns. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This child, this human, was rewriting the definition of what could exist in her classroom. And she was terrified. Because she knew, without a doubt, that once a human adapted this quickly, the lines between species and the boundaries of her understanding would never be the same again. She closed her eyes, thinking of his face, determined, nervous, unyielding. And in the silence of her office, filled with the faint hum of interstellar energy coursing through the building, she realized the truth. Teaching Marcus Hall wasn't going to be about biology, or language, or math. It was going to be about learning what it meant to truly see another being, human or alien, for the first time. And that, she suspected, was far more terrifying than any interstellar curriculum she had ever faced. The morning sun, or whatever passed for it in this section of the United Earth Academy, filtered through the adaptive windows of Classroom 7X in muted bands of violet and gold. Dr. Lillian Marchant arrived early, as she always did, but today the air in the room felt different. The faint hum of the floor, the shimmering walls, even the floating desks themselves seemed charged with expectation. Marcus Hall was already there, perched on the edge of his levitating desk, fiddling with a small mechanical toy he had brought from Earth. The toy was a simple construction, gears and springs that clicked in satisfying sequences, but in this environment, it almost seemed archaic, rudimentary compared to the alien instruments scattered across the room. Yet, Dr. Marchant caught the way some of the alien students, particularly the silicon-based ones whose minds worked in crystalline logic, leaned closer, not with curiosity alone, but with genuine analytical interest. "Good morning, Marcus," she said cautiously, trying to keep her tone neutral. She'd noticed last night that the footage she had reviewed wouldn't leave her sleep. His ability to adapt, to observe, to integrate alien signals into his human cognition, it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. He looked up, eyes bright, with that unshakable mixture of nervousness and determination. "Morning, Dr. Marchant," he said, voice small but clear. I think I understand what happened yesterday." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what's that?" "That? I think they're like puzzles. You just have to figure out the rules." His words were innocent, yet there was a depth there, a recognition that defied his age. She couldn't tell if it was genius, instinct, or something entirely else. Before she could respond, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in motion. Today's lesson was Advanced Xenogenetics, an interactive exercise that required students to manipulate molecular models in three-dimensional space. Usually, the class followed a rhythm. Aliens would perform intricate maneuvers, exchanging energy pulses, chemical signals, or psychic feedback. Humans had never been able to keep pace. Except Marcus. Almost immediately, he began coordinating with his assigned alien partner, a six-limbed creature whose neural communication had always posed a challenge for new students. He mirrored the alien's gestures, compensated for delays in signal processing, and corrected errors almost instinctively. Dr. Marchant stood frozen at the front of the room, watching as her carefully calibrated lesson plan unraveled in real time. The other students noticed. The ones who had been indifferent, who had tolerated the human presence with mild curiosity, began shifting, observing him. And then, astonishingly, a ripple of interaction began. One alien began emulating Marcus's adjustments. Another synchronized with them. Within minutes, a network of cooperation had formed, entirely new, entirely unplanned. Dr. Marchant felt a lump in her throat. He wasn't just keeping up. He was leading. "Marcus," she said, voice steady though her heart raced, "how are you doing that?" He shrugged, still focused on the task. "I just watch. Then I try. It's like figuring out how someone else thinks." The words were simple, but the implication was terrifying. He wasn't just learning alien patterns. He was decoding them, translating them, and then teaching the aliens, without realizing it, that there was another way to approach their problem. By lunch, the energy in the room had shifted from tension to something else entirely: awe. The previously competitive species were now collaborating, influenced not by instruction, but by Marcus's example. Dr. Marchand noticed subtle changes even in the classroom's environment. The floating desks adjusted differently, the ambient lighting pulsed in smoother rhythms, and the normally aloof crystalline beings had altered their focus in ways she could only describe as admiration. It was unprecedented. During break, Dr. Marchand cornered Marcus in a quiet corridor lined with luminescent panels. "Marcus," she said, lowering her voice, "you have to understand, what you're doing is unusual. Extraordinary. You could disrupt the class dynamics entirely." He tilted his head. "I'm just trying to learn. And I think they're trying to learn from me too." Her chest tightened. She'd trained countless students, human and alien alike, but never had she faced something like this. A human child, so small, so ordinary in appearance, was altering the very fabric of interspecies education. And she realized, with an unsettling clarity, that it wasn't just the classroom at stake. If Marcus could do this here, in controlled conditions, what could he do in the wider galaxy? The afternoon brought an exercise in emotional communication, a domain where humans traditionally failed miserably. The aliens in this class didn't speak in words. They shared emotion, color, vibration, pheromones. Marcus's partner was a semi-transparent, liquid-like entity whose mood shifted in iridescent waves. Usually, humans froze, overwhelmed by sensory input. Marcus, however, leaned in, matched the rhythms, and even managed to influence the alien's mood. Within minutes, he had created a calm, synchronized state that even Dr. Marchand had to admit was beautiful. Viral, her assistant, hovered near Dr. Marchand, skin pulsing bright blue with excitement. "Dr. Marchand, he is performing at levels previously unattainable by any human. Even the most advanced Zena students took months to achieve this." Lillian swallowed hard, a mix of pride and fear twisting in her stomach. "I know," she whispered. "And that's exactly why I'm worried. Because this wasn't just learning. Marcus was evolving the classroom. He was teaching the teachers, alien and human alike, new ways to communicate, new ways to understand. And it was happening so quickly that Dr. Marchand felt powerless to intervene. By the end of the day, the unthinkable happened. The students, inspired by Marcus, began forming their own experiments, sharing techniques and insights across species in ways that had never been permitted or recorded. And when the final bell rang, Marcus turned to Dr. Marchand, eyes wide in earnest. "Did I do okay?" he asked. She smiled, but it was tight. "You did more than okay. You changed everything." Outside the classroom, as she watched him walk down the corridor, she realized the truth. Teaching Marcus Hall wasn't about keeping him safe, or helping him survive the alien environment. It was about surviving alongside him mentally, emotionally, professionally. Because he was no ordinary student. He was a catalyst. And every rule she had relied on, every assumption about species boundaries and human limitations, was now under scrutiny. That night, back in her office, Dr. Marchand reviewed the day's footage again. She saw Marcus's movements, his interactions, the subtle shifts in the alien student's behavior. She saw patterns she couldn't explain, outcomes that defied every algorithm and model. And she realized something terrifyingly exhilarating: the galaxy itself might never be the same. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. She could send a report, flag him for evaluation, warn the administration. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't. She couldn't. Not yet. Because what Marcus Hall was doing, what he was too important, too extraordinary, too human to contain. And as she sat in the hum of the Academy's late-night energy, she understood the unthinkable truth: this child would teach her more than she could ever teach him. The first tremor hit at precisely 10:17 a.m. Classroom 7X, usually a place of orchestrated chaos, the kind only an interstellar education system could produce, shuddered. Not violently, but enough that the floating desks wobbled, holographic projections flickered, and the normally composed alien students froze mid-motion. "Earthquake?" Marcus whispered, gripping his chair. Dr. Lillian Marchant shook her head, her pulse racing. Unlikely. The building is stabilized against any tectonic activity. She scanned the room, trying to understand. The anomaly wasn't structural. It was behavioral. Something, or someone, was radiating energy that disrupted the environment itself. Then she saw it. One of the crystalline beings, the usually stoic, immovable Keelara 9 students, had fractured. Its form, normally precise and geometrically perfect, pulsed with jagged shards, scattering reflective light across the room. Its voice, if one could call it that, rang out in a high-frequency resonance that made the human ear ache. "I cannot compute," it repeated, over and over. All eyes turned to Marcus. He stood frozen for a heartbeat, unsure whether he had caused this. But as Dr. Marchant's gaze found him, he realized what was happening. The very act of his presence, his methods, his intuition, his human way of thinking, was disrupting patterns that had existed for eons. Dr. Marchant took a deep breath, forcing herself to step forward. "Marcus," she said firmly, "we need to stabilize the class. Focus on your partner. On your exercises. Everything else will follow." Marcus nodded, small but resolute. He approached his assigned alien, a semi-liquid, color-shifting entity, and began to mirror its fluctuating emotional signals. Slowly, meticulously, he sent back stabilizing cues, patterns it recognized, sequences it could respond to. The entity shimmered, then solidified, its chaotic pulses returning to rhythm. Other students, inspired by Marcus's courage, began to do the same. Within minutes, a coordinated network emerged, a cross-species collaboration that had never existed before. Even the Keelara 9 slowly reassembled, its crystalline form correcting itself under the influence of Marcus's subtle guidance. Dr. Marchant watched, a combination of awe and fear tightening in her chest. This was more than teaching. This was leadership. Vision. A human child was orchestrating interstellar communication in ways decades of research had failed to achieve. But then the second tremor hit. This time, it wasn't subtle. The walls vibrated violently. Holographic displays cracked and fizzled. Some of the more sensitive species recoiled, while others panicked outright. And Marcus's eyes widened. I can't do it alone," he whispered. Dr. Marchant moved closer, instinctively placing her hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Marcus. Everyone is with you. Trust them." He took a shaky breath, then did something astonishing. He raised his hands, palms outward, and began to communicate not just with one partner, but with the room itself. He used everything he had learned: emotional cues, physical mimicry, linguistic patterns, even intuition. The room pulsed in response, a symphony of collaboration, chaos channeling into harmony. Dr. Marchant could hardly breathe. She had seen extraordinary humans in her career: scientists, diplomats, explorers, but never one so young, so small, yet capable of coordinating forces that spanned multiple worlds. And then it worked. The tremors stopped. The walls shimmered back into stability. The floating desks floated with renewed precision. The alien students, many of whom had never before collaborated outside their species, were now connected in an intricate web of communication. Marcus Hall stood at the center, exhausted but triumphant, like a conductor who had just led an impossible symphony. Silence followed. A silence heavier than any chaos, filled with unspoken recognition. Dr. Marchant stepped forward, voice trembling. "Marcus, you've done something no one thought possible. You've united them." He blinked at her, unsure what to say. I tried." "You didn't just try," she said, swallowing hard. "You've shown us that the rules we've relied on about species, intelligence, limitations, they aren't absolute. You've changed everything." The rest of the day passed in a kind of stunned reverence. Classroom 7X was no longer just a learning environment. It had become a laboratory of potential, a bridge between human and alien cognition, a place where anything seemed possible. When the final bell rang, Marcus gathered his things, his small frame almost invisible among the towering aliens. Dr. Marchant caught up with him outside the classroom, away from prying eyes. You know, she said carefully, you've changed more than the class.
You've changed me. I thought I knew what it meant to teach. But you've taught me what it means to learn.
Marcus tilted his head, a small, self-conscious smile tugging at his lips.
I'm just me.
Being just you is more powerful than you realize, she said softly. You've reminded us all that sometimes, the most extraordinary lessons come from the smallest voices. He glanced at the alien students in the corridor, interacting, sharing, teaching each other in ways no human manual could explain.
Then back at her. I think we're just getting started.
Dr. Marchant nodded, a warmth spreading through her chest. She realized she would never see teaching or the universe the same way again. Marcus Hall was more than a student. He was a bridge, a catalyst, a reminder that limitations existed only until someone dared to question them. And in that moment, as the sun or whatever the academy called it lit the corridor in gentle bands of light, Dr. Marchant understood a truth she would carry for the rest of her life: the galaxy didn't need her to guide it. It needed her to watch, learn, and sometimes, be brave enough to let a 12-year-old human change it all. For the first time in her long career, she didn't feel like the teacher.
She felt like a witness to something extraordinary. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that the story of Marcus Hall, the human who bridged worlds, was only just beginning.